Hello, my name is Eric Gracie. I'm the FM Group Administrator for the Center for Forest and Wood Certification at the University of Kentucky. The following PowerPoint is on Mesophytic Cove sites that were identified in the FSC U.S. Controlled Wood National Risk Assessment. The further goals of the PowerPoint are to assist with identifying where MCSs may occur on the landscape, defining what an MCS is, and to provide a checklist tool for identification of MCSs. MCSs in the National Risk Assessment work recognizes high conservation value areas in FSC. An HCV is an area of biological, ecological, or social or cultural importance. So FSC is trying to ensure that their system helps maintain and protect these areas by preventing wood coming from a HCV entering in their system as controlled wood. So basically FSC is wanting to prevent wood coming from a Mesophytic Cove site from entering into their controlled wood system. So why are MCSs considered HCVs? They meet the criteria for biological and ecological importance. MCSs that remain represent a rare ecosystem in the region. Taking on old growth characteristics, MCSs are one of the most diverse forested ecosystems in the temperate region of the world. So the following region was identified by FSC US where these Mesophytic Cove sites could occur, and you're basically looking from north central Pennsylvania down the Appalachians into North Georgia and across the Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee and Kentucky. They also identified the areas to be higher than 1,000 feet in elevation. So to kind of pinpoint the location, we've talked about the region there, but to really get into the weeds a little bit about the location and description, the following handful of slides are going to address that. First of all, they're sheltered concave slopes, coves with steep slope gradients. I think everybody probably that's working in this area are familiar with what a cove is and isn't. MCSs typically occur on low to mid north and east facing slopes. They can occur on lower west and south facing slopes as well. And they're at low to moderate elevations. 1,000 to 3,600 feet was identified as where they're most likely to occur. So MCSs are closed canopy, diverse hardwood forest. The overstory is not dominated by one or two species, but should be a diverse mix of several of the following species: basswood, northern red oak, white oak, yellow buckeye, beech, yellow poplar, white ash, sugar maple, black walnut, hickories, and potentially eastern hemlock. So the timber harvesting threats to Mesophytic Cove sites primarily deal with disturbance. These areas have very rich soil, high production areas, high moisture contents, and because of that, the soil, disturbing the soil and then also opening the stand up to increase sunlight levels will promote early successional species such as yellow poplar, and the cove sites will then become dominated by yellow poplar, and you'll lose the species diversity, which is the primary attribute of the HCV. Historically, this is what has happened to most of the Mesophytic Cove sites in the region. Also with invasive species being much more prevalent at this point in time than they were the first time these areas were harvested. These stands that remain with the increased disturbance might not only revert to being dominated by yellow poplar, but also will be impacted by invasive species. The other issue is the operational difficulty. Because they are cove sites, you got steep gradients, you have limited access points. It's going to be very difficult to harvest these cove sites without significant planning and operational sophistication to prevent disturbance levels that will move the cove site from being highly diverse into one that's dominated by early successional species such as yellow poplar. So having spent a considerable amount of time working in eastern Kentucky and familiar with the MCS region that was identified in the National Risk Assessment, cove sites, as you guys are probably aware, are not uncommon at all. And oftentimes some of the better cove sites will start taking on some characteristics of a mesophytic cove site, and this has always created some confusion or uncertainty whether or not you were in a mesophytic cove site or you were not. So what we find is that a lot of times you'll get on the second growth, north-facing coves and the lower slopes, you'll get yellow poplar, northern red oak, and walnut in the stand. And maybe sometimes you'll mix in a yellow buckeye, a basswood, but typically these stands still do not have the diversity that's going to be needed to be considered a mesophytic cove site. If you take some plots or some readings, they're still going to be heavily predominantly yellow poplar and will not have the species diversity in the understory as well to take on all the attributes of the mesophytic cove site. So in summary, the mesophytic cove sites is a sheltered cove site at low to moderate elevation, 1,000 to 3,600 feet, typically found on north and east facing slopes. Closed canopy hardwood forest with high species diversity in both the overstory and the understory, and should have old growth characteristics. These MCSs can take as much as 200 years to develop. So you should be looking at large trees without evidence of previous clear cutting or farming. So the following set of slides are going to be mesophytic cove site identification key. It's basically a dichotomous key. It's a if yes, then go, if no, then go to a different lines. And the idea behind the key is it would be something that you could have as a tool to help distinguish some of the areas that we discussed earlier, the stands that align themselves with the mesophytic cove sites, but don't fully have all the attributes of a mesophytic cove site. So the key kind of works like this. The first question is the harvest area contain a cove greater than 2 acres? If yes, then we're going to go to 2. If no, then we're going to stop, because if you don't have a cove, then you don't have a mesophytic cove site. So number 2, is the cove located low to mid slope? If yes, we're going to go on to 3. If no, we're going to stop. Typically upper slopes are going to be too dry for a mesophytic cove site to exist. So number 3, is the cove predominantly on a north or east facing slope? If yes, then we're going to go to 5. If no, we're going to go to 4. So if we go on to 4, then we've got a south or west facing slope. So at that point in time, is the cove on a lower slope of a predominantly south or east west facing slope? So at this point in time, if it's yes, then we're going to go to number 5, because as we mentioned earlier, you can have mesophytic cove sites on the lower slopes of west and on south or west facing slopes. If no, then we're going to stop, because mid slope and upper slopes are too dry for the mesophytic cove site to occur. So when we get to 5, does the cove show evidence of farming or extensive logging? And some of the keys on that are, if you're seeing fencing, rock piles, outbuildings, numerous stumps. So if you answer yes to this question, then the past land use would prohibit the diversity needed to be a mesophytic cove site. If no, then we need to go on to 6. So now that we're at 6, we need to start looking at the overstory. Does the dominant or codominant overstory trees, are they made up of at least 4 of the following indicator tree species? American beech, northern red oak, yellow poplar, sugar maple, American basswood, yellow buckeye, white oak, white and red ash, black walnut, hickories, and occasionally there's eastern hemlock. So there's actually two types of mesophytic cove sites, rich and acidic. They're both highly diverse and meet the HCV determination, but when you get in these acidic MCSs, you're more likely to pick up more hemlock in those sites. So if we answer yes to that, then we need to move on to 7. If no, we can stop because the overstory lacks the diversity to be MCS. I did not get into the understory species, one, because I'm not a botanist, and most of the folks that will be using this ski are not as well. So I think that if we focus on the overstory trees and get that diversity, then you know that'll fall in line with the MCS characteristic. So we've answered yes to number 6, so we're going to move on to number 7. And at this point in time, we're going to look at the makeup of the dominant and co-dominant overstory trees. Particularly, we're looking to see if yellow poplar makes up less than 1/3 of the overstory trees. This can be done by a simple tally. You can also take plots, only counting the overstory trees. You would not count every tree that's in the plot. You're just going to be looking for overstory trees. If you answer yes to this, then we would go on to number 8. If it's determined that that yellow poplar consists of more than 1/3 of the trees, so you've got a pretty good stand of yellow poplar, then you can stop. The stand is going to be too dominated by yellow poplar, and therefore is going to lack the diversity needed to be a mesophytic cove site. If we get to step 8, at this point in time, you've got high potential for a mesophytic cove site. And later in the presentation, we're going to conclude with some recommendations to do if you've made that determination that you have a mesophytic cove site in your harvest area. So next I'm going to show a short video that was filmed at the University of Kentucky's Robinson Forest. It's a cove site that I've been in many times, and it has a lot of the characteristics of a mesophytic cove site. So we're going to use the identification key to see if we can make a stronger determination on whether that mesophytic cove site exists. But also, while you're viewing the video, just take note of the species diversity, the water regime, some of the restricted access points, the lay of the land. All these things are characteristic of a mesophytic cove site. Hello, I'm Eric Gracie. I'm the Forest Management Section Administrator for the University of Kentucky's Forest and Wood Certification Center. The video that you'll be viewing today is done in conjunction with a PowerPoint training on mesophytic cove sites. The purpose of the video is twofold. One is to use the Mesophytic Cove Site identification key in the field, and also to give you a visual of what a cove site looks like that has a high potential to meet the mesophytic cove site criteria. The area that we're going to be going to is on Robinson Forest. It's Boarding House Branch, and it has, as you can see with the elevation and the concave topo lines, that it's going to meet some of the criteria from the get-go, and we're going to fully evaluate that on site. Okay, so we've made our way up Boarding House Branch. We're at around 1,175 feet of elevation. So let's quickly go back over some of the characteristics of Mesophytic Cove Site, just as a refresher. One of the things is that they're going to be found from 1,000 to 3,600 feet of elevation, and there are going to be very diverse mix of overstory species. The overstory species should include yellow poplar, American beech, white oak, red oak, possibly eastern hemlock, yellow buckeye, basswood, and there's a handful more of indicator species that are in the checklist that we'll go over in a bit. The other thing is these Mesophytic Cove sites typically are going to take on old growth characteristics where they're going to possibly take 150 to 200 years to develop. One thing that I do know, because I have the history of Robinson Forest, most of the logging ceased around 1900 in Robinson Forest. There has been some logging for research purposes since then, but there's a high probability that site we're at right now, a lot of the trees were last cut at that time, and they're pushing 120 years old. Okay, so going back to the topo map that we showed earlier in the video, you could tell that cove sites were not rare for the region. However, as we discussed earlier, these Mesophytic cove sites that take on these old growth characteristics are rare, and they're a rare ecosystem that deserve our protection. Part of the problem that makes these areas hard to protect is disturbance. Any type of disturbance, whether it's intensive logging, and historically they were logged intensively and then farmed, resorted into those stands coming back in almost pure yellow poplar. As you're looking around here, you're going to see a bigger, wider diversity of tree species. The other issue is, at this point in time, you can see how steep the terrain is on both sides. You can probably hear the water in the background. So you've got restricted entry points and you've got lots of water, and it's very difficult to do any type of harvesting in these areas without promoting the yellow poplar to come back into this site and losing the diversity that you need for them to become Mesophytic cove sites. Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about the characteristics of a Mesophytic cove site, and hopefully from the videos and panning around that you're able to see some of the diversity in the overstory. And at that point in time, because we have this diversity and it's not completely dominated by yellow poplar, there's obviously a lot of yellow poplar in this site. We would probably be a good idea to use our checklist to make a more positive determination on whether or not we have a Mesophytic cove site or not. So that's basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to just go through, it's an 8-step process. If we get all the way to the end, we're going to go through the process. So one is if this was a harvest area, is the cove greater than 2 acres? So having looked at the topo and having walked the site, I know that the cove site is greater than 2 acres. So at that point in time, I need to go on to step 2. So the next question would be, is the cove at a low to mid slope? Yes. I know that the elevation change here is 860 to 1580, I think. So it's about a 700-foot elevation change, and we have come up about 250 feet. So I'm going to consider that low to meet that low to mid slope criteria. The next step would be, what is the aspect of that slope? Does the slope face north or east? All right, so I have a pretty good idea because the sun's out today, but I'm going to take my compass out and just reconfirm what I think. So right now we have a southeast facing cove site. So we're going to have to answer no to question 3. We do not have a north or east facing site, and we're going to go to 4. So is the cove at a low to mid slope? We've already answered that. It is. So that meets the criteria, even though this cove is on a south or southeast facing slope, because it's at low slope, it's going to have the potential to be a Mesophytic cove site. This is a key criteria on these south and east, south facing and west facing slopes. As you move up the mountain, these aspects are going to just get too dry to meet the moisture requirements and humidity levels for these Mesophytic cove sites. You can't really tell it today because we're not it's leaf canopy's not on, but I've been here in the summertime. This is a high humidity, definitely a high site, a high moisture site. All right, so now we're going to go to 5 because we're going to go to slope. So the next thing is to look for farming or evidence of farming or extensive logging. Some of the things that you look for, obviously, if it's been logging, are going to be stumps. And if you're looking at stumps, you know that the harvesting has been too recent for the site to take on low growth characteristics because the stumps were rotted by. If you're things for farming, rock piles. on your site, then you know that this activities have been too recent for this to meet a Mesophytic Cove site requirements. So at that point in time, I do not see any of those activities. So I'm going to move on to 6. So now I need to look at the dominant overstory trees. What we're needing for is diversity. So I need to have the overstory trees made up in at least 4 indicator species. So American beech. We've seen numerous American beech on the way up, and we've got sprouts and small ones here. Then we've got, so we got that. Northern red oak, standing behind one. The one's behind me. Yellow poplar, sugar maple, yellow buckeye, white oak, cucumber magnolia, and bitternut hickory and eastern hemlock are all indicator species, and I've seen all of those in this cove site. So that means at this point in time, we're going to answer yes to that and are going to need to go to 7. So if we did not get those 4 indicator species, at that point in time, the overstory was going to lack the diversity needed for it to be a Mesophytic Cove site, and we could stop, and we have no issue with this being a Mesophytic Cove site. But we're going to move on to 7. So at this point in time, we need to make sure that yellow poplar makes up less than 33%, or 1 out of every 3 trees in the overstory. So the best way to do that is to either do a physical count or take some plots and get the physical count and just kind of see where you're at. That's what we're going to do. We're going to shut the video off. I'm going to take a few plots and kind of see what our composition mix is. So we've taken our plot data to get confirmation, get a little clear confirmation on the overstory composition, and having looked at that data, we're right at that threshold. 1 out of every 3 overstory trees are yellow poplar. So it would be best to err on the side of caution in these sites because they are so rare. So hopefully the video provided some visual aid and assistance on helping determine if you have a Mesophytic Cove site or not. It also at least showed some of the diversity that you're going to see in a stand that has a high potential of being a Mesophytic Cove site. And at that point in time, the key should help paint a clearer picture of whether or not you have a Mesophytic Cove site and it's worthy of protection. So we're going to conclude the PowerPoint with going over the recommendations if you think you have stumbled upon a Mesophytic Cove site. The preferred recommendation would be for the controlled wood user to work with and the landowner to work with the government or a private conservation agency to protect the area in perpetuity. As previously stated, these are rare ecosystems that deserve our protection. Most known Mesophytic Cove sites are currently under some level of protection. So any additional Mesophytic Cove sites discovered would be highly sought after by the conservation community. The next recommendation, if the decision is made to harvest, it would be a selective harvest that leaves 75% of the overstory trees, and the overstory trees should be distributed evenly over the cove site. And of the 25% of the trees harvested, 80% of those trees should consist of yellow poplar or related species such as cucumber magnolia. This prescription will aid in a sunlight regime that doesn't overwhelmingly favor yellow poplar, and by removing mainly yellow poplar, will maintain the species diversity in the overstory. And finally, the last option would be to harvest the Mesophytic Cove site following any state and federal regulations, knowing that the future stand will be dominated by yellow poplar and therefore it's going to lose its Mesophytic Cove site characteristics. Harvesting in this manner would prevent controlled wood claims from the harvested material. So if you would like more information or training materials on controlled wood, or would like to print out a copy of the Mesophytic Cove Site Identification Key, you can visit our website at forestcertificationcenter.org. Thank you for viewing this PowerPoint, and hopefully it's been beneficial.